Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to review the HBO documentary film called Spielberg, which is based on the life and works of the legendary director that is Steven Spielberg. Now, I don't necessarily feel as though I need to justify this, but I think there is a debate to be had as to who the greatest director is of all time. And while I'm not saying that Steven Spielberg is the greatest director of all time, I think he's in that discussion. And you can throw many other directors in that discussion, and I will leave that open for you to decide. But I think definitely Spielberg needs to be in that discussion. He's a director who has a special place in my heart because a lot of the films I grew up on, Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., the list goes on and on and on. They were such a prominent part of my childhood. The first Steven Spielberg film that I saw was Raiders of the Lost Ark. I went to the cinema to see it. And the second film was probably E.T. And then I would have then grown up on the Jawses and the Close Encounters and things like that. And I think throughout the 80s and 90s it was pretty much untouchable. And I think as he has matured, his filmmaking, his films have matured, the films that he's chosen to do, and I probably distance myself a little bit from some of his films because some of them aren't in my taste nowadays, but every time his name is attached to a movie, I'm interested, and I will look at the subject matter and decide if it's a film that I want to see, generally speaking. So this film basically focuses on his life as a director and a person, right from his childhood. He talks a lot about his growing up, his Jewish background, his parents, his sisters talk. His parents are on the documentary talking, his sisters are on the documentary talking. They don't really hold anything back. He talks about his parents breaking up when he was young, how he was bullied because he was a bit indifferent and nerdy and he was ashamed of his Jewish background. They talk about all of that in this. It's fascinating stuff. How he got into Hollywood, basically making TV movies and TV episodes first, and his big break was obviously the movie Duel, which really raised a lot of eyebrows, and that's what got him his first movie, Sugarland Express, and then Jaws, which absolutely blew him into the stratosphere in regards to popularity. It's and actually a very, very good documentary, this. I'm one of these, if you like. I'm not a huge reader of books, but when I do read a book, it does generally tend to be biographies, and it's about people who interest me, lives who I think have led interesting lives. I'm not interested in a biography of someone who's like 25 years old and fires out an autobiography. They've got to have lived a life, and it's got to be a life I've been interested in and followed. So, consequently, I like documentary movies if it's about people who I'm interested in. And this is a really, really high quality documentary, I have to say. I do think you could argue they blow a little bit too much smoke up Spielberg's backside here, but it's about him. They're not going to be critical of him overly. But they don't shy away from the movies that haven't done so well. They talk about 1941. They talk about some of the other movies that didn't particularly perform well with critics. And they also, I think, which I'd forgotten about now, I remember in like the 80s and probably some of the early 90s, until he did Schindler's List, probably, Hollywood was a bit snobby about Spielberg in the sense of, oh, he can only do blockbusters, he only does them type of movies, oh, we're not interested in you. Until he made Schindler's List, and then he couldn't be ignored anymore as to how fantastic a filmmaker he was. And I'd actually forgotten about that. I remember it at the time because I remember being really cross about it, thinking, how could someone make the movies he's made and be like so shunned by Hollywood, by the snobs at the Academy and things like that? But because now he's so well respected and he's made so many what you would call more artistic movies, like Schindler's List and you know, Amistad and Lincoln and I mean Munich. The list goes on and on and on. He's really, really delved now into his artistic side, and he's made all the movies that he wants to make now, not just the massive popcorn movies, as you might want to call them, but he still loves to make them too, as he talks about. So they do talk a lot about some of that sort of stuff in this documentary, the Hollywood snobbery towards him. And there's a lot of celebrity actors and stuff talking in this documentary about how much they enjoyed working with him and his approach to filmmaking, as well as many of his director friends as well. Simply put, this shouldn't be missed.